Welcome back. Now it's turn, Roger, so your questions to the Congressman.
Thank you, Tuan. I have a question for Congressman. As an Asian, we have, I think it's a very important issue about the health care.
Yes.
Medicare for all, Obamacare. Could you a little bit talk about that? What's your plans and policy issues are, so we can talk about.
Absolutely. First of all, healthcare is a human right. I don't care who you are or where you come from. Everybody deserves healthcare. Every American deserves affordable, quality healthcare, and it shouldn't depend on how much money you make or in what community you live. That's the bottom line. Now, to get there, I support President Obama's plan, and I don't think we should be tearing it apart. I think we should be strengthening Obamacare to make sure it reaches more Americans and there's more competition and more choice in the market. And I say that as the only candidate in this race who actually gets single-payer health care, because I made a commitment to continue going to the VA, to the Veterans Administration, even as a United States Congressman. I said that as long as my fellow vets are going there and it's not the healthcare system that they deserve, I'm going to see it firsthand so that we can improve it. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of single-payer healthcare. The VA negotiates prescription drug prices, which Medicare does not. That's why my public option to compete with private healthcare plans and ensure that everybody has options for healthcare in America would not just be Medicare for all, because Medicare is a plan designed in 1963. They can't negotiate prescription drug prices. People on Medicare pay more for prescriptions than those of us at the VA. So there's lessons that we can learn there. But I've also seen the bad side of single-payer healthcare. I got surgery not too long ago, and to make a long story short, they sent me home with the wrong medications. And that's just not acceptable, and that's not the kind of healthcare plan that I want to force on every American. I want free market competition like we have in the rest of America. That's how we've become such an innovative society. I want to make sure people have choices, and if you like your healthcare plan that you have today, then you should be able to keep it. Just know that there's going to be competition from a public option that will help drive down prices for everybody. It's just like we have competition for the United States Postal Service. I wouldn't want the next president to come in and say, FedEx and UPS, you need to go out of business. That's what the people promoting Medicare for All want to do. They want a Medicare system that's like the U.S. Postal Service. I think if Americans have choices for delivering packages, they certainly should have choices for delivering something much more important like healthcare.
All right, so makes so much sense.
Thank you very much.
Kathy?
So hi, I have a question about your global policy. You said that you are interested in foreign policy,
Yes.
and it's also one of my interests because I'm quite nervous about China. I mean,
Yes.
it's in my generation or in our generation, we're not so far apart in age. We are very much concerned about how China is going to become, of course, I think, the next world superpower, or is already. In the Asia Pacific region, there's a lot of unrest because of China. We see what's happening in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in the Philippines, and then on the other side of the Atlantic side, we have the rise of fascism. We have Poland, we have Hungary, we have Italy electing right-wing presidents or governments. We also have a lot of problems with NATO at the moment. I'm very nervous about the future of NATO.
Well, my philosophy for our foreign policy is that we should win wars without fighting them. That means emphasizing diplomacy first, which is quite the opposite of what we're doing right now, which is fighting wars without winning them.
Yes.
I believe that China is the major national security and also economic security threat to the United States. And we've got to contain the rise of China. There's a few things we need to do. I believe we should build a Pacific version of NATO to formalize the alliances that we have in the Pacific and strengthen them, especially when we have some of our most important allies like South Korea and Japan that don't always get along. So I want to have a formal alliance in the Pacific to help stand up to the rise of China and the threat of a North Korean nuclear weapon. We also have to confront China in the way that they are attacking us through the internet every single day and literally stealing American jobs and American military secrets through cyber attacks. And the president's crazy tariff war is not going to stop that. We need to strengthen our cyber defenses. We were just talking about immigration. This administration has allocated more money for the southern border wall than for cyber protection for the entire nation, and yet that's actually where the jobs are going. They're going to China. So we need to confront China in a much more forceful and realistic way, and all of this should be led with diplomacy. Because at the end of the day, we do not want a war with China, but we need to make sure that America is the lone superpower, that we retain our leadership in the world. Now, with regards to NATO in Europe, you're right. Europe is getting unsettled, and NATO isn't doing the job that it used to do. One of the reasons is that we have to modernize NATO, because NATO was built on a 1949 framework to stop tanks and missiles from Russia coming into Eastern and then Western Europe.
Yes.
They never imagined that Russia would be attacking us, NATO allies, through the internet, literally trying to undermine our democratic elections. So we need to modernize NATO to deal with these more modern threats. And it's an example of one of the alliances that we need to strengthen around the globe. Ultimately, we need to restore moral leadership to the United States in the White House. The commander-in-chief, which is one of the most important jobs of the next president, of the president, should be someone who leads with moral authority around the globe. When I was a Marine in the 1st Marine Division, our division motto was no better friend, no worse enemy than a United States Marine. That should be the motto of the United States of America. No better friend, no worse enemy. If you're our friend, we will stand by you. We will stand up for you. We will fight for your freedom. If you are our enemy, you can be sure that we will give you the toughest time you imagine. This president, of course, is doing the opposite. He's cozying up to enemies like Kim Jong-un, to enemies like Vladimir Putin. And he's not standing by our allies either in Europe or in the Pacific. So we have a lot of work to do, but I will bring my leadership and experience as a combat Marine, as an infantry officer, to the Commander-in-Chief's office. And I think it's significant that unlike anybody else in this entire large field, the first time I have to make a decision involving the lives of young Americans and live with the consequences of that decision won't be when I'm sitting in the Situation Room of the White House. That is unique leadership that I bring to this race and that I will bring as the next president of the United States.
Yeah, maybe we can go back from you first, Kathy. Short questions. We have about 4.5 minutes left.
Okay. So, like, my second question is, of course, like economic policy.
Sure.
Yeah. So, what is your stance on? I'm trying to condense this because it's a bit difficult. A lot of people are worried about an EU military, like a European-wide alliance that the NATO will basically coalesce. Because of a lot of money that is, of course, involved in it, it will save money. What is your stance on that? Do you approve of the EU actually forming its own military? Because I know that a lot of Americans look very critically on that.
Well, I think that the European Union can do more to ensure its own security rather than just having it always provided by the United States. But it should always be in partnership with us. And strengthening NATO should be our goal. Modernizing NATO should be our goal, not simply replacing it.
Yeah, but where would the money come from?
Well, actually, there is a plan that President Obama set in place for the NATO countries to pay more as contributions to their own security.
Yeah, 4%.
And what we need to do is follow that plan. Now, President Trump has, because he just doesn't like President Obama, tried to undermine that plan, tried to say that it's not real or that NATO nations aren't contributing enough. That's not true. But we do need to hold them accountable, and that's something that I would do as the Commander-in-Chief.
Okay. Thank
Roger?
you.
Congressman, I wanted to ask you, I'm involved with the Feeding the Homeless. Every 4th Monday of the month, we go downtown, we do with a bunch of my friends. What do you have a plans for, and I see beautiful people out there, they're mentally really not stable. They're great people. Do you have any plan for this whole country is really going through, and a lot of vets are in that. So what kind of plan that you have to help them?
We have a housing crisis in this country where not enough people can get affordable housing, and that's in small towns, but it's especially in our big cities. San Francisco is a great example of a place where people simply cannot afford housing, and we've got to address that, both through loosening zoning restrictions, many of which were put in place back in like the 1920s with really racist ends or goals in mind, so we've got to loosen restrictive zoning. We also have to invest more in transportation so that if you don't have housing right in a downtown, Boston is an example of a place where there's just not enough space to build more housing, but if it were much easier to commute through fast rail service to some of the cities that are just outside of Boston, you'd have many more options for people in the city. So those are some of the changes that we need to make. But I want to address something you referred to specifically, which is that some of these homeless people have mental health issues. And we have not done enough in America to confront mental health, and it's one of the signature issues of my campaign. I decided that if I'm running for president, applying for the top leadership position in the country, that I should lead by example. And so I became the first presidential candidate in American history to discuss mental health at a personal level, to talk about dealing with post-traumatic stress when I came back from 4 tours in Iraq. And how by seeking help and getting help and surmounting that challenge, I think it's made me a better leader, a better dad, and given me the experience to live with the tough decisions that a president has to make. We have to address the mental health issues in our country, and I have the most aggressive plan to do so. First, we'll make sure that every veteran and every active duty service member gets a regular annual mental health screening to make mental health as routine as physical health. Second, we will extend that program to every high schooler in America. There are a lot of high schoolers today who are struggling with mental health issues either because they're afraid of gun violence or the effects of social media. I want to make it routine that whether you're sick or not, just like you go to get an annual physical or you go to the dentist, you're going to get a mental health exam. And if you don't need anything because you have a mental health issue, they'll just talk about things like meditation that can strengthen your mental health. This is something our top troops are doing. They will set the example for every high schooler in America. And third, we'll establish a nationwide hotline, 511, that anyone can call to get immediate help for any sort of mental health issue. This will do a lot to address the homeless crisis. It will do a lot to get veterans back on their feet, and it will do a lot for everybody in America who's touched by mental health issues.
Don't go away. We'll be right back.